Hey everyone, I'm Justin with Vmp Performance, and today I want to talk with you about 07 to 12 Shelby GT500 upgrades. In front of me, I have the stock supercharger off of my 2012 Shelby GT500. I was just telling everybody that this is the last and greatest non-TVS supercharger that Eaton ever made. It's an M122 for 122 cubic inches of displacement, and it is what it comes factory on 07 through 12 Shelby GT500s. It's kind of important to note, this one in front of me is silver. In 2011, Ford made them silver, I think to signify that the car was now coming with an aluminum block. That's my personal theory. Before that, they were black, and the cars came with an iron block. So if you have an 11-12 Shelby GT500, you have an aluminum block and a silver blower to match. And this was before Ford went to the 5.8 liter. The car still had a 5.4 liter 4-valve mod motor. Man, back in the day, we used to upgrade these things like crazy, and they still made pretty decent power. So that's what I want to talk about today. Some basically bolt-on upgrades that you can do to the stock car with the stock supercharger. You know, just everything you do before you go and swap the supercharger. I want to make sure everybody knows that if a blower swap is not in your budget, you still have a lot of options available to you. Let's take a trip back in time and talk about the 07 Shelby GT500. So just imagine this supercharger black, and I'm going to show you one of the parts that came factory on 07 to 09 Shelby GT500s and contributed to their factory 500 horsepower rating. This is the stock intake off of my 2007 Shelby GT500. And it's kind of hard to believe we actually used to use these. It is what we call a closed air box. It has a panel filter inside, and it severely restricts horsepower. It also suppresses the supercharger whine. When you're at wide open throttle, there's really nothing restricting the supercharger, so the act of compressing the air through an Eaton root style supercharger creates a whine. That noise travels out of the throttle body into the intake and gets totally suppressed, and all you hear is engine and exhaust noise. So it is a really big change when people install a cold air intake like this JLT 123 milliliter deal. And we're going to use these on 07 through 14 Shelby GT500s up into the 800 plus horsepower range. So if you purchase this part for your 07 to 09 and have us do a tune to go with it, it's going to replace this factory restrictive quiet air box and really let your supercharger breathe and make a lot more horsepower. This cold air intake here is just one component of a package of parts that we very commonly upgrade on the 07 to 12 Shelby GT500s. Anytime you change the cold air on one of these newer vehicles, you change where the mass air sensor lives and you change how air flows over it, and you have to recalibrate the PCM accordingly or your air-fuel ratio will be wrong. So you're going to want to do one of these with a custom Vmp tune. The cold air is worth about 20 horsepower and the tune is worth about 60. And while most people are in there, they also go ahead and upgrade the supercharger pulley. And they go to a bigger idler to take up the slack in the belts. So this leads us down a rabbit hole, but trust me, it's a really good rabbit hole to go down because the power gains are incredible, the bang for the buck is great, and it is actually the best horsepower to dollar ratio you will ever get from modding your 07 to 12 Shelby GT500. So the supercharger pulley is right here on the front of the supercharger. This factory blower has a 3-inch supercharger pulley. We do a 2.5-inch supercharger pulley that is stock look. You can see it's got a similar contour and shape and even a similar paint finish. You can guess these were really, really popular when the car was in warranty, and they're still really, really popular to give you a nice, clean factory appearance under the hood, but still make a lot more horsepower. So one of our most common upgrades for the 07 to 12 Shelby GT500s is cold air, Vmp custom tune, Vmp 2.5-inch stock look pulley, and idler pulley. one of the things I want to tell you about, and this is covered in a separate video, is that the pulley is press fit. When you swap it out, you're going to want to get one of our Vmp Pulley Tools. We specifically designed these to remove the factory supercharger pulley and not damage the supercharger or the shaft. I really don't recommend using a 3-jaw puller for a couple of reasons. You will put marks on the back of the supercharger pulley. It'll be junk when you're done. A lot of people mess up the shaft that's under here. There's actually a M8 thread in the center of the supercharger shaft, and that is what we grab onto to reinstall the new Vmp pulley. So I just want to make you aware of that and kind of explain some of the nuances of that so you can make sure you purchase the right parts if you're going to do this at home or if you're going to have a mechanic do it that has never done it before. Just buy our tool and it will make their life a lot easier. So I've covered one of the most common upgrade packages for 07 to 12 Shelby GT500s. You can purchase it as a kit from Vmp or you can purchase these parts individually. If you're going to do them individually, do the tune first, then the cold air, then the pulley. In that order. The gains are the biggest from the tune. You get about 20 horsepower from the cold air, and you get about 30 to 40 horsepower from the pulley. Now, this is where it gets complicated, which is not necessarily a bad thing. If you have a 2010 to 2012 Shelby GT500, you actually get a higher flowing intake from the factory. Ford did 110 millimeter mass air housing, this kind of ugly paper filter, and for federal noise regulation reasons, they actually put a muffler on the intake. Most people go ahead and replace the whole intake with higher flowing JLT assembly, even though those cars came with a factory cold air, started about 40 to 50 horsepower higher per the factory Ford rating. They just still go ahead and upgrade everything. So whether you have an 07, 08, or 09 with the factory airbox, or you have a 10 to 12 with the factory cold air, you're going to pretty much end up back in the same place with aftermarket parts. So this combination of parts is going to make about 530 to 550 rear wheel horsepower. For those of you that are just getting into the game of modding your Shelby GT500, that doesn't sound like a lot, but we in the aftermarket measure power at the wheels. So we're taking into account 15% drivetrain loss. If you work out the math, you're losing about 15% by the time you get to the rear wheels. So you can figure that you're going to be up around 650 at the crankshaft. That is 100 to 150 horsepower over stock, depending on, once again, what your Shelby GT500 you have, and if you started out with the closed or the open air box. That's an awesome bang for the buck, but it doesn't stop there. If you're not happy with this package of parts and you still want more, but you cannot make the jump to upgrade the supercharger yet, there are a few more things that you can do with the factory supercharger. The first thing is going to be one of these big, shiny, pretty pieces. This is our Vmp twin jet 67 millimeter throttle body. I wish I had one of the stock throttle bodies here because they are just downright ugly. This is a billet aluminum, nicely machined and polished piece, and the factory one is just an ugly cast piece. It tends to collect water right here, and you get a little bit of discoloration in the aluminum. This thing will look great on your car, and it'll add about 10 to 15 rear wheel horsepower on a stock supercharger, and this can also go with you to a bigger supercharger where it is even more of a performance improvement at higher boost and higher flow levels. This is a great piece to pick up to run both on your stock supercharger and continue with you on your build. We also have another option at Vmp. The Vmp High Flow Inlet Elbow replaces the factory supercharger inlet elbow that would normally go right here, and I actually have the silver one just for reference. The opening on the Vmp Elbow is much larger on the front side. On the back side, it's a little bit larger. It has a unique shape. If you're brave, you can port your supercharger to match the shape of our elbow. It's almost like it was meant to be here. The way that you could port that out and match this. This is going to be worth about another 10 to 15 horsepower. It's going to work together with the throttle body to get as much air as possible into the factory supercharger. Depending on the year of your Shelby, there's two different configurations for the Vmp High Flow Elbow. On 07 to 10, you'll install this little fitting and you'll have 2 tubes to hook up to the existing vacuum lines. And on 11 to 12, you won't use this, and there's an actual sensor that bolts down here with some long 40mm bolts and some spacers, and basically Ford just moved the sensor directly to the elbow instead of having it mounted on the strut tower. Pretty simple. The Vmp Elbow is universal, and then it's just set up with the correct fittings. For maximum performance, you do want to port match the stock supercharger to the shape of our elbow, but you can also just install the elbow by itself. There is always a little bit more you can do. Some people continue to upgrade the factory supercharger by having the inside of it ported. Some people even go to overdrive lower balancers. Honestly, we don't recommend it because this supercharger is pretty much at its limit. This is the best port job that Ford and Eaton ever did on a factory supercharger. You know, you'll see some people that get these things up to 580, 600 rear wheel horsepower on a stock sealed engine, but we really feel like 530 to 560 rear wheel horsepower is the reasonable limit. And at that point, to go much higher, you might as well just invest in an upgraded supercharger. I hope you enjoyed this video and it helps you understand some of the more common upgrades available for 07 to 12 Shelby GT500s. You can definitely modify this car even with the stock supercharger, make a lot more horsepower and not break the bank. However, if you want to take it up a couple more notches, in our next video, we will talk about supercharger and fuel system upgrades for the Shelby GT500. Thanks for watching, everyone. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share. Feel free to comment on this video if there's anything you want to know more about that we didn't cover, and I'll see you next time.